The screams were what I noticed first. Blood-curdling shrieks of sheer terror slicing through the drone of the airplane engines. I jolted awake from a fitful nap to see passengers recoiling in panic, slamming up against the bulkheads in desperation. "What's going on?" I called out, but my voice was drowned out by the escalating bedlam. That's when I saw them. Grotesque figures swarming through the cabin, a nightmarish mix of human and insect features. Their desiccated bodies were dotted with pulsating egg sacs that oozed green. Spindly limbs tipped with jagged bone protrusions raked at the air as they skittered up and down the aisle. The creature's arrival defied all logic or reason, as if they had phased through the fuselage itself. Reality seemed to bend and warp around their presence, a disturbing telepathic onslaught of alien consciousness bleeding into my mind. "Get down!" I screamed at my wife Jen and our 2 kids huddled beside me. We crouched low as the creatures descended in a ravenous swarm. 2 of the beasts landed on the headrest in front of me, fixing their compound eyes on us. Their jaws were lined with metal fangs that gnashed and chattered, spraying caustic saliva. A 3rd one landed on my shoulder, its blade-like feet slicing through the fabric of my shirt and into my flesh. I cried out and swatted it away with a magazine, but it just scrambled back along the cabin wall, moving with an unnatural, stuttering gait. More and more of the monstrosities poured in from seemingly every vent and seam in the plane. "Dad? Mom? What are those things?" My son Tyler blubbered, burying his face against Jen's chest. I don't know," I choked out, feeling their alien presence scratching at the edges of my consciousness. Waves of disorientation and nausea pounded my senses as the horde swarmed us, clicking their razored mandibles. Our fellow passengers weren't so lucky. The things sprang on them from all angles, slashing with their bony limbs. A woman's throat was cut open in a grotesque spray of arterial blood. A young man's eyes were gouged out by a creature's jagged appendage, stabbing through the sockets. Beside me, an elderly lady was cocooned in some kind of organic resin that the aliens excreted, her muffled screams fading as they injected their eggs inside her body. The wails and screams of the afflicted blended into one hellish chorus of suffering. "We have to get off this plane!" Jen cried as she shielded our kids. "How? We're in the air!" I glanced ahead to the cockpit, half expecting to see the pilots fleeing or already dead, but the door remained sealed. As if sensing my thoughts, several of the larger insectoid beasts turned their compound eyes toward the cockpit entrance. A handful split off and skittered that way, slashing at the reinforced door with their bony limbs and fanged maws. The emergency exits were proving useless as more passengers clawed desperately at the doors, only to be swarmed upon by the ravenous horrors and dragged away. Their alien numbers seemed to multiply by the second, undulating through the cabin in a sickening frenzy of violence and bloodshed. My mind reeled under their invasive psychic presence, a gnawing, gnashing hunger that stripped away all individuality. Above the din, a new sound began to build, like 1,000 teeth grinding in unison. Looking upward, I saw hundreds more of the wretched creatures had amassed on the ceiling panels above us, peering through the gaps and joints with their unblinking compound eyes as they massed for another onslaught. With a thunderous crack, the overhead bins exploded open, raining shrapnel and debris down upon us. The ceiling panels ruptured in a spectacle of twisting metal as even larger versions of the aliens punched through in a breach. Hulking brutes, covered in bone plates and quivering organic weaponry. We huddled together on the floor, and I threw my body over the kids, using my own flesh as a shield. The creatures descended on us in a ravenous flood, slashing with spurred appendages and drooling clacker jaws. Their psychic onslaught manifested as an overwhelming need to kill and consume all in their path. One of the brutes landed in front of us, its spurred bulk taking up nearly the entire row. Its mandibles unfolded into a nightmarish metallic blossom, dripping with corrosive bile. I swung with my briefcase, clocking it in the side. It unleashed a loud screech that made my eardrums vibrate. Its bone armor deflected the blow with ease, and those jagged mouth tendrils whipped outward, shredding my shoulder to ribbons. Behind me, Tyler screamed for me. I gritted my teeth, clutching at the wound as greenish ichor sprayed across my face and into my eyes. Blinded temporarily, I felt Jen gripping me as the creature lunged, ready to rip us apart. With my dimming vision, I saw its maw unfolding mere feet away, ready to devour us whole. My kids' shrieks joined the cacophony of screams and alien shrieks ringing through the cabin. I felt their warm tears and braced for whatever unspeakable horror was to follow. Then a new sound pierced the madness. A reverberating pulse that slammed into me like the shockwave from a sonic boom. The aircraft rattled and shuddered under the power of that thunderous concussion. I risked opening my seared eyes to see the nightmare brute recoiling, clasping its armored head. The other horrors screeched and buckled from whatever intense force had staggered them. Another shockwave followed, a high-pitched thrum that dislodged the bone plates and caused the aliens to screech in further agony. I turned to see the source of the seismic disturbance, a petite, unassuming woman draped in a crimson shawl. She stood in the center aisle, hands outstretched as arcs of deep, purple energy spilled from her fingertips. The woman's eyes blazed from within as she unleashed another shockwave that resonated through the metallic airframe. One by one, the alien horrors burst apart in showers of bile and bone fragments. Their ruptured remains collapsed to the carpet, quivering amid puddles of noxious fluids. Soon only the sound of convulsing death throes filled the cabin. The auburn-haired woman stood unperturbed, the waves of purple energy still rippling over her shawl. When the last of the aliens had been destroyed, she lowered her arms and turned to address us. Her eyes had returned to a soft hazel as she spoke in a gentle, soothing timbre. "It's over now. You're all safe." I clutched at my slashed shoulder, staring in awe at this unassuming savior amid the sea of alien carnage. Who are you? What were those things?" The woman smiled faintly, tucking a lock of her hair aside. "They were a scourge, a plague upon all worlds, both physical and spiritual. They would have infested and consumed your kind until nothing remained." Her gaze drifted across the shredded cabin, the dismembered bodies strewn about like discarded waste. When her eyes fell back upon us, an understanding passed between our bruised souls. "Existence is a tenuous gift, dear ones, an endless battleground between radiance and shadow. You would do well to cherish every breath, for the cosmos harbors far older horrors than these." As rescue teams swarmed the grounded plane, the auburn-haired woman faded out of sight. No fanfare, no grand departure. Just an understanding nod before disappearing back into the fabric of whatever hidden realm she'd emerged from. Jen and the kids were ushered off into a sea of flashing ambulance lights. I felt a comforting hand on my shoulder and glanced back to see nothing but the dim twilight spilling through the breached fuselage. I gazed out at the painted horizon. My blood still pounded with the chorus of screams and alien shrieks that had rattled the aircraft. Existence itself was tenuous indeed, far more precarious than my human mind could comprehend. We had narrowly survived an encounter with horrors not meant for mortal eyes. Yet despite the harrowing ordeal, I felt gratitude for the fragile spark of life still burning. And somewhere in the multiverse, incomprehensible beings waged an eternal war to safeguard that precious spark from being extinguished. Death from above or deliverance from the shadows, our fate had hung in the balance. By the grace of mysterious guardians, we had been spared the nightmare of total oblivion.